Hello, I'm Valerie Reid, and tonight I have two selections to read for you. The second selection is from A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, and it will be of the Christmas spirit. The first selection is actually the prologue of the book I just published, which is called One Stop West of Hinsdale, with a subtitle of Love Derailed in a 60s Suburb. It takes place in a suburb of Chicago. The years are 1960 to 1974, my years 7 through 20. It's available at your favorite online booksellers, and it's also available here at Graves Library. We have 10 copies here for sale. And I want to take the opportunity to say that on February 1st, which is a Saturday at 2 o'clock here at Graves Library, I will be doing a book talk. So I hope that a lot of you out there will come and see me in person and be present for my first book talk. So I'm going to read the prologue of this book because this is all you really need to hear to sort of set the scene and let you know what's ahead. Prologue. I've been alive for 65 years, Dad. You've been dead for 30. For the past few years, I've been writing about you, but today I realize that it's to you I should write. That's the answer, isn't it? It's you who need to hear this story. You I need to tell. You may be dead in this world, but you are alive in the next, and I would not be surprised if you are saying to yourself, finally. I started writing in the first place because something happened that blew me back to the past. Meg's husband went missing. The people of Nantucket searched and prayed, and one prayer got answered. They found him. But he had ended his life. You probably knew all this before I did, and I'm sure it broke your heart. I prayed for Meg and their 6 children, and then I sat there wondering at the way life can keep such secrets from us. Keep them, then fling them at us years later in ways we could never guess at years before. From there, my mind took off. It carried me back to the day I met Meg, a curly-haired girl in a pack of youngsters who appeared out of nowhere, calling you Dad. Then, further still, to the time before Meg, when we were happy and you belonged to us and no one else. I thought about how Meg grew up to stay with a suffering spouse while others choose to leave. You, for instance, who chose to leave Mom. You, who chose to leave us. When did we start to lose you? When you met Barbara, I suppose, Meg's mother, with her red hair and freckles and 6 kids of her own. But was that after you gave up on my mother or before? Was Mom crazy like you claimed and drove you to drink? Or did your drinking drive her mad? For 50 years, I've wondered, who really wrecked our home? So I've turned to the past for answers. I'm sifting through memories, mapping Mom's moods, searching your face, seeking the moment you decided we could live without you. Do you remember that I loved you with all my heart? I mean, my whole complete heart. And you loved me with all your heart too. I know you did, because that's how you made me feel. That a day could ever come when that might end, a day when you'd rather go live with other children, was inconceivable to me. The way there are no words for certain concepts in certain cultures, my soul hadn't the capacity to imagine it. But it happened, didn't it? And I hate that I'm still not over it. There. I've said it. I never got over it. Not once in all these long gone years have I let myself tell you how much it hurt. I only pretended to cope because I knew how badly you wanted me to. When I started writing about you and Mom and Brent and me and Audrey, I wrote from all directions, but then my mind sharpened and tilted because one night on the internet, I read the professional profile of Barbara's youngest child. There, towards the end, was this sentence. My father was a storyteller. No, I yelled in my head. My father was a storyteller, not yours, mine. Oh, Dad, how can I ever explain how that one innocent statement slayed me? It's true, Dad. You were a storyteller. You told us magical tales, dreamed them up on the spot. But those were our stories, Dad. Mine and Brent's and Audrey's, our stories, and our father. You gave to them. Now that I am this old, I see you better. I see you the way black ground becomes 1,000 separate flowers in the sun. And I ask myself, if I were dead, what would I hope? I would hope my children could someday understand me. And if it can't happen while I'm here on earth, they'll be left with one choice. Go back to the past. See me. See us. And remember our story. And try with all their might to get it right. That's what I'm doing here, Dad. Now I'm the storyteller. And that's the prologue of my memoir. And now, from A Tree Grows in Brooklyn by Betty Smith, it is Christmas Eve, 1912, in a very, very poor neighborhood. There was a cruel custom in the neighborhood. It was about the trees still unsold when midnight of Christmas Eve approached. There was a saying that if you waited until then, you wouldn't have to buy a tree, that they'd chuck them at you. This was literally true. At midnight on the eve of our dear Savior's birth, the kids gathered where there were unsold trees. The man threw each tree in turn, starting with the biggest. Kids volunteered to stand up against the throwing. If a boy didn't fall down under the impact, the tree was his. If he fell, he forfeited his chance at winning a tree. Only the roughest boys and some of the young men elected to be hit by the big trees. The others waited shrewdly until a tree came up that they could stand against. The little kids waited for the tiny foot-high trees and shrieked in delight when they won one. On the Christmas Eve, when Francie was 10 and Neely 9, Mama consented to let them go down and have their first try for a tree. Francie had picked out her tree earlier in the day. She had stood near it all afternoon and evening, praying that no one would buy it. To her joy, it was still there at midnight. It was the biggest tree in the neighborhood, and its price was so high that no one could afford to buy it. It was 10 feet high. Its branches were bound with new white rope, and it came to a sure, pure point at the top. The man took this tree out first. Before Francie could speak up, a neighborhood bully, a boy of 18 known as Punky Perkins, stepped forward and ordered the man to chuck the tree at him. The man hated the way Punky was so confident. He looked around and asked, "Anybody else want to take a chance on it?" Francie stepped forward. "Me, mister." A spurt of derisive laughter came from the tree man. The kids snickered. A few adults who had gathered to watch the fun guffawed. "Ah, go on, you're too little," the tree man objected. "Me and my brother, we're not too little together." She pulled Neely forward. The man looked at them, a thin girl with starveling hollows in her cheeks, but with the chin still baby round. He looked at the little boy, with his fair hair and round blue eyes, Neely Nolan, all innocence and trust. "Two ain't fair," yelped Punky. "Shut ya lousy trap," advised the man who held all the power in that hour. "These here kids has got nerve. Stand back, the rest of yous. These kids is gonna have a show at this tree." The others made a wavering lane. Francie and Neely stood at one end of it, and the big man with the big tree at the other. It was a human funnel with Francie and her brother making the small end of it. The man flexed his great arms to throw the great tree. He noticed how tiny the children looked at the end of the short lane. For the split part of a moment, the tree thrower went through a kind of Gethsemane. "Oh, Jesus Christ," his soul agonized. "Why don't I just give him the tree, say Merry Christmas and let him go? What's the tree to me? I can't sell it no more this year, and it won't keep till next year." The kids watched him solemnly as he stood there in his moment of thought. But then, he rationalized, if I did that, all the others would expect to get 'em handed to 'em. And next year, nobody at all would buy a tree off me. They'd all wait to get 'em handed to 'em on a silver plate. I ain't a big enough man to give this tree away for nothing. No, I ain't big enough. I ain't big enough to do a thing like that. I got to think of myself, my own kids. He finally came to this conclusion. Oh, what the hell, them two kids has got to live in this world. They got to get used to it. They got to learn to give and to take punishment. And by Jesus, it ain't give, but take all the time in this goddamned world. As he threw the tree with all his strength, his heart wailed out, it's a goddamned rotten, lousy world. Francie saw the tree leave his hands. There was a split bit of being when time and space had no meaning. The whole world stood still as something dark and monstrous came through the air. The tree came towards her, blotting out all memory of her ever having lived. There was nothing but pungent darkness and something that grew and grew as it rushed at her. She staggered as the tree hit them. Neely went to his knees, but she pulled him up fiercely before he could go down. There was a mighty swishing sound as the tree settled. Everything was dark, green, and prickly. Then she felt a sharp pain at the side of her head where the trunk of the tree had hit her. She felt Neely trembling. When some of the older boys pulled the tree away, they found Francie and her brother standing upright, hand in hand. Blood was coming from scratches on Neely's face. He looked more like a baby than ever, with his bewildered blue eyes and the fairness of his skin made more noticeable because of the clear red blood. But they were smiling. Had they not won the biggest tree in the neighborhood? Some of the boys hollered, "Hooray!" A few adults clapped. The tree man eulogized them by screaming, "And now get the hell out of here with your tree, you lousy bastards!" Francie had heard swearing since she had heard words. Obscenity and profanity had no meaning as such among these people. They were emotional expressions of inarticulate people with small vocabularies. They made a kind of dialect. The phrases could mean many things according to the expression and tone used in saying them. So now, when Francie heard themselves called lousy bastards, she smiled tremulously at the kind man. She knew that he was really saying, "Goodbye. God bless you." It wasn't easy dragging that tree home. They had to pull it inch by inch. They were handicapped by a boy who ran alongside, yelping, "Free ride, all aboard," who'd jump on and make them drag him along, but he got sick of the game and eventually went away. In a way, it was good that it took them so long to get the tree home. It made their triumph more drawn out. Francie glowed when she heard a lady say, "Oh, I never saw such a big tree." A man called after them, "You kids must have robbed a bank to buy such a big tree." The cop on their corner stopped them, examined the tree, and solemnly offered to buy it for 10 cents, 15 cents if they'd deliver it to his home. Francie nearly burst with pride, although she knew he was joking. She said she wouldn't sell it for $1 even. He shook his head and said she was foolish not to grab the offer. He went up to $1.25, but Francie kept smiling and shaking her head. No. It was like acting in a Christmas play where the setting was a street corner and the time a frosty Christmas Eve, and the characters a kind cop, her brother, and herself. Francie knew all the dialogue. The cop gave his lines right, and Francie picked up her cues happily. And the stage directions were the smiles between the spoken lines. They had to call up to Papa to help them get the tree up the narrow stairs. Papa came running down. To Francie's relief, he ran down straight and not sideways, which proved that he was still sober. Papa's amazement at the size of the tree was flattering. He pretended to believe that it wasn't theirs. Francie had a lot of fun convincing him, although she knew all the while that the whole thing was make-believe. Papa pulled in front, and Francie and Neely pushed in back, and they began forcing the big tree up the 3 narrow flights of stairs. Johnny was so excited that he started singing, not caring that it was rather late at night. He sang "O Holy Night." The narrow walls took up his clear, sweet voice, held it for a breath, and gave it back with doubled sweetness. Doors creaked open, and families gathered on the landings, pleased and amazed at the something unexpected being added to that moment of their lives.